Good morning and welcome. Thanks for making it here, day two. We've had a great kickoff, good start, opening keynote from Admiral Branch, and now we're going to have a chance to hear further steps in how we really deliver the strategy. How do we make this strategy work? I'm pleased to have the honor to introduce Vice Admiral Daly. My partner and USNI is a very strong and effective partner and a show that AFC is very proud to help support. He's got a long background in these systems and this particular delivery requirement, and I'm sure he'll moderate this panel and get us an answer to the question we're posing. How do we deliver the capabilities to the warfighter? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Admiral Daly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to, it's a preference of mine to not have the little mini speeches and not have everybody on the panel do that. So the format today is I'll do an icebreaker question for each member on the panel, and we'll try to get as quickly as we can into a discussion, engage all the members of the panel quickly, and then we'll step over to engage you as the audience and do the same. Thank you, General Wood, for the introduction. Of course, the theme again is how do we deliver the capabilities the warfighters need when they need them, and it's a good discussion because we have over many years had an acquisition system that was fairly ponderous and would deliver late, and we had such a technological edge that we could deliver late, maybe over cost, and still have a reasonable expectation of maintaining a technological edge for a period of time that made that investment worth it. Well, now a lot of that's being turned on its head because you can't take as long, you can't spend that money, and you won't necessarily deliver with the edge and have it and take it. I mean, you all remember all the way back to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, some of you, and we owned the night. We had night vision goggles. Well, now every Cub Scout den, has night vision goggles, and all those advantages that we used to have, that we could reasonably maintain, are on a very thin margin. And I think we've heard that consistently from the service chiefs leading up to this event in their pronouncements over the last couple weeks. It's clearly reflected in the budget that was delivered early last week. And I think we're going to hear a lot of that tomorrow when Admiral Stavridis talks to General Neller and Admiral Richardson and Admiral Michelle. So this is a good lead up for that. So I'm going to make some introductions. I am going to spend a little time on that because I think you should know who you're talking to. But one thing that just pops out right away is if you think of the world in terms of top line, there's a lot of top line sitting right here. As a matter of fact, if you just take the Navy as an example, I think between NAVAIR, NAVSEA, and SPAWAR, I think that's well over half the Navy's top line. So if you want to know where's the money, talk to these gentlemen right here, and they'll take your requests. So I'll get right into introductions here. We're very pleased to have Vice Admiral Paul Grossklogs, who goes by G8. He's an 82 Naval Academy grad, assumed command of NAVAIR in October 2015. In this position, he's responsible for leading 28,000 personnel, both civilian and active duty, plus some 9,000 additional contractor service support personnel who they consider part of their integrated team at NAVAIR. They're organized into an aircraft division, weapons division, fleet readiness centers located across the country. NAVAIR's leading responsibility is to acquire, test, and sustain all naval aircraft, Navy and Marine, and the associated weapons, sensors, and support equipment. As such, approximately $35 billion of Department of the Navy resources flow through NAVAIR every year. He's a career aviator who flew the SH-2 Sea Sprite, SH-60B aircraft in the fleet while conducting multiple deployments on the destroyer John Hancock, the frigate Donald B. Berry, destroyer Comte de Grasse, and the Leyte Gulf CG-55. He commanded helicopter squadron HT-18. Vice Admiral Grossklogs has held multiple acquisition positions, from test pilot as a lieutenant to program manager for multi-mission helicopters, PMA 229, and as a captain, during which, up to the time he's a captain, which all that time in the MH-60 Romeo program represented the time that that aircraft was successfully introduced into the fleet. Previous flag tours: Commander Fleet Readiness Centers, NAVAIR Deputy Commander for Logistics and Industrial Operations, Vice Commander NAVAIR, and Commander for Anti-Submarine Warfare Assault Special Missions, PEOA, and then most recently, Principal Military Deputy for ASN RDA. Let's welcome Admiral Grossklogs. Next person to my left and to the left of G8 is Rear Admiral Bruce Baffer, U.S. Coast Guard. He's a 1984 graduate of the Coast Guard Academy. Rear Admiral Baffer serves as the Coast Guard's Assistant Commandant for Engineering and Logistics and Chief Engineer to the Coast Guard. In this role, he's responsible for all naval, aeronautical, civil, and industrial engineering and logistics for the Coast Guard's 23,000 facilities, 230 ships, 1,800 boats, and 200 aircraft. Admiral Baffer has served a variety of engineering, acquisition tours. He previously served as the Coast Guard's Assistant Commandant for Acquisition and Chief Acquisition Officer. He's a licensed professional engineer, a certified Level 2 acquisition professional. His many operational tours included command of cutters Thetis and Chase. Let's welcome Rear Admiral Baffer. Next up in the batting order is Rear Admiral Dave Lewis. He's kind of the mayor of the other end of the floor over here, and with his group. He's the next part of the San Diego Convention Center, and has recently seceded. But Rear Admiral Lewis was commissioned in 1979 through the Navy ROTC program at University of Nebraska. He, unlike Admiral Spicer, wanted to go to an accredited school. As the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command commander, he leads a global workforce of 9,700 civilians, military personnel who design, develop, and deploy advanced communications and information capabilities. At sea, Admiral Lewis served as a surface warfare officer in Spruance 963, Biddle CG-34, and Ticonderoga CG-47. His major command assignment was Aegis Shipbuilding Program Manager in the Program Executive Office ships, where he led the delivery of DDG-7 DDG-51 class ships and procured another 10 ships. He was there in the era where, he'd authorize 4 or 5 DDGs per year. A different era indeed. Rear Admiral Lewis's shore assignments include Assistant Chief of Staff for Maintenance and Engineering, Commander Naval Surface Forces, the Naval Secretariat Staff, Navy Sea Systems Command Staff, Aegis Shipbuilding Program Office, Supervisor of Shipbuilding Bath, and Readiness Support Group San Diego. Upon selection to flag rank in 2009, he served as Vice Commander, Naval Sea Systems Command, and then served 4 years as the PEO ships, where he directed the delivery of 18 ships and procurement of another 51 ships. Let's welcome Rear Admiral Dave Lewis. Next up in the batting order is Rear Admiral Lauren Selby, Naval Surface Warfare Center, representing NAVSEA today. Admiral Selby commands, well, I'll start at the beginning. He was commissioned in 1986 through the ROTC program at the University of Virginia, UVA, head of NSWC. He's responsible for over 16,000 scientists, engineers, technicians, and support personnel in 7 NSWC divisions that perform research, development, test, and evaluation for the future Navy, as well as provide all the in-service engineering and support for the Navy that's in place today. A career submariner, he served in attack submarines Puffer, Pogey, and Connecticut. He commanded USS Greenville, SSN 772. In these boats, he conducted multiple deployments to the Western Pacific, Northern Atlantic, and the Arctic. He previously served in the following acquisition billets: Principal Assistant Program Manager for Advanced Undersea Program Office, PMS 394, and Program Management for both the Submarine Imaging and Electronics and Electronic Warfare Office, PMS 435, and the Advanced Undersea Programs Office, again as the leader, PMS 394. Let's welcome Rear Admiral Selby. Finally today, representing the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps Systems Command is Colonel Ben Stinson, who is the commanding officer of the Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity, a.k.a. MCTISA. For the first 10 years of his career, Colonel Stinson was assigned to various air traffic control, command and control positions. His acquisition assignments include program analyst, operations officer, team leader, deputy program manager, program manager. His program portfolios have included command and control systems, both air and ground, unmanned air systems, and robotics. He's worked in 2 Navy PEOs, PMA 263 and PMA 213, no doubt got a campaign ribbon for those from the Marine Corps, at NAVAIR, and at Army PEO Ground Combat Systems at the Army Tank and Automotive Command, a.k.a. TACOM, in addition to MARCOR SysCom. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, he served as the 1MEF Forward G9 Assistant Chief Staff for Technology and Innovation, which I thought was very cool that the Marines put him right up forward, where he coordinated in-theater fielding new equipment and met and evaluated all the urgent operational needs, the urgent needs statements, and co-authored the MRAP Urgent Needs Statement. Transferring to Camp Pendleton in 2014, he began serving in his current assignment at MCTISA. He's also dual-hatted as Director of Development and Test for the Marine Corps. This is also cool. We'll wrap up here. He's got 3 children. 2 are Marines, and 1, his daughter, is at the Naval Academy. Welcome, Colonel Ben Stinson. Okay. So we spent our time on introductions, and I thought now we'll just get right into questions, as I mentioned earlier. And my first question is for Admiral Grossklogs. Innovation and speed are top priorities of the CNO and the Commandant. So what is NAVAIR doing to get capability of the fleet faster? And can you talk about lessons learned, any success stories, what more needs to be done or changed?
Okay, thanks, Pete. Yeah, I could probably talk about this for a half an hour, but I promise you I won't. I'll try not to. Important to the CNO, important to the Commandant, speed of capability to the fleet. So it's obviously important to me, and it's one of our 2 strategic imperatives at NAVAIR right now. And we're trying to take really a 3-pronged approach. I'm breaking it down a little simplistic just in the sake of time, but 3-pronged approach. The first is trying to leverage the rapid prototyping and experimentation that Secretary Stackley has been talking about. He testified to Congress back in January at the acquisition reform hearing about the idea of taking things that have matured technologically, so they're no longer in the science and technology realm, but have not yet made that leap into a full program of record, and getting those capabilities out to the fleet so that the sailors and Marines can experiment with them, so they can figure out how to best use them, and they can figure out how to craft the requirements that come later, rather than what we tend to do today, which is lay down a set of requirements that is based on fleet input when they have very little insight in some cases to the actual technology that's available to meet those requirements. So we're trying to turn that on its head a little bit. This is a new initiative, a little pushback in Congress because the normal way of doing this is you allocate funding specifically for a program based on well-defined requirements. In this case, we're trying to let the fleet understand the capability a little bit before we ask them to define the requirements. It kind of makes sense, but it's not the way we usually do business. The second focus area is on what we call Airworks. And, with apologies to those companies who own Phantom Works and Skunk Works, my predecessor decided to call this group within NAVAIR Airworks, and we've been doing this for about 18 months. And this group is really a very small, very focused lead systems integration organization that we've set up inside of NAVAIR. And they are focused entirely on rapid capability to the fleet. That's what they do. That's their reason for existing. They're very small, very focused, but they're also very agile and can move to project very quickly. They've got a core team which includes all the competencies or all the roles you need, from engineering program manager to comptrollers and contracting officers. But more importantly, they have the ability to reach out to any of those other 28,000 people inside of NAVAIR for the skill sets that might be required for a particular project. They bring those people in, they work on that project for a short period of time, and then they go back to the work that they were doing before or go back to another project. So it's a very agile way of staffing our projects. We're focused on projects that last typically no more than 2 years, although quite honestly, the majority of these projects are lasting in the order of months, not years, and they've been very successful. And I think the one project I like to hold up as an example is the P8 requirement. We got an urgent operational needs from the fleet. Said, hey, we need video cameras, full motion video on a P8, so we can have a 360-degree spherical coverage of anything approaching that aircraft at any time. So this team, our Airworks team, managed to put that together, come up with a design, development, a solution installed on the aircraft and deployed in a matter of months. It took them less time to do all that than it took for the Navy to make a decision to actually go and solicit for that work. I got to make clear, we're doing the lead system integration role here. That does not mean that the government is focused on doing all the work internally. This is actually turning out to be a great opportunity for small businesses that we worked with at Pax River and at China Lake. And we're also finding new relationships with some of the mid-tier vendors as well, particularly in the manufacturing area, because we have no desire to get into serial production of some of the things that we're putting on airplanes. So when you think about Airworks, think about mods, think about upgrades, think about ECPs, and think about very fast responses to urgent needs and rapid deployment requirements from the fleet. That's Airworks. So that's the second focus area. The third is the biggest challenge, quite honestly, and that's our programs of record. Pete hit on a couple of things. My perspective is we've become complacent because we haven't had that near-peer competitor, and we've been able to get away with being slow. We've become very risk-averse because risk has not been tolerated. And quite honestly, we've lost our accountability because of the bureaucracy that's been built up around our acquisition programs. And we've got to fundamentally change the way that we do work inside of NavAir. I'm not interested in trying to change the way that OSD manages our programs, provides oversight. I'm interested in trying to change the way we do business inside of NavAir to get capability to the fleet more quickly. And without going into all the whys and wherefores, I'll give you one example and then leave it at that. The RAQ-25, formerly known as U-Class, long history of requirements, churn, changes. You probably saw what the change in the most recent budget that was rolled out last week. Regardless of those overarching requirements, we still have to be able to get an unmanned aircraft on and off an aircraft carrier that we want to work with us 24/7, 365. Not a demonstrator, not a prototype, part of our air wing. When we originally laid out the requirements for U-Class, we were not so much focused, well, there was a lot of focus on those overarching mission capabilities. But what we do as NavAir is we go across every one of our technical areas and they create a 1 through N list of derived requirements. So we end up giving to industry, giving to you all, a specification, a statement of work that literally contains thousands of shell statements. And every one of those shell statements is of equal importance because if you don't comply with it, you're not complying with the terms of the contract, right? Thousands of them. And then we have to verify them and validate them and test them. What we're doing with the RAQ-25 is we've taken those thousands of shell statements down to a couple of hundred. We're streamlining the team. We're taking the typical hundreds of NavAir folks that would be working on a program like that and cutting it down to dozens. That is the culture change that we're trying to get to with inside NavAir. And it really is a change in culture because that is not the way most of the people working at NavAir today have done business for the last 20 or 25 years. It's also a change in the way we're going to do business with industry. We're not giving up our technical authority. We're not giving up ownership of the engineering trade space, but we're going to be much more closely engaged with our industry counterparts as we have those discussions on a daily basis about what is inside of that engineering trade space and what are we willing to give up in the interest of speed to the fleet. Cultural change is going to be tough, and we're starting with the RAQ-25, and hopefully you'll see that we get to release that RFP sometime in the not too distant future. I'll leave it at that, Pete.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to throw this open, the same speed to the fleet question, if anybody else wanted to wrap in on that. But I mean, Dave Lewis, you once told me that, yeah, great, we got Canes now to where it's perfectly delivering.
Yeah.
And it may be perfectly outdated as well, because by the time you get some of these major systems in line from an acquisition and procurement standpoint, you may suffer, the demise in the technology end. I don't know if you had something to offer on that.
Sure. The issue with Canes first was just getting it out in the fleet and getting the install process through, and we've done that. There's about 31 installs that are complete, and we've got quite a few ongoing. The issue now is that modernization process. Now, we're blessed in the C4I world because most of our stuff is mostly commercial. So we're not inventing new UAVs and that kind of stuff. So we're not necessarily plowing new ground there. The issue for us is how do we identify appropriate commercial technologies and then get them into the fleet as quickly as possible. And have we done the right things in terms of architectures? Have we done the right things in terms of our procurement processes to do that? And we're struggling with that. I'll be frank about it. Congress is helping us with some of the commercial process legislation. I like that. And we just need to keep pushing on that. I think in many cases we don't have to ask. We're inclined to want to ask, risk-averse accountability, and I'm certainly saying let's just go do it. NGEN, that's happening. NMCI and NGEN, we're pushing a lot of commercial technologies as quickly as we can, very quickly, frankly. A lot of our ORT, Operation Rolling Tide, cyber vulnerability remediation work is moving very quickly. We went from identifying a requirement to resolve ORT issues to fielding the first system in less than 18 months. And that was done on Michael Murphy in November. So that was from concept, lab testing, and then deployment and implementation on a ship. That's an upgrade to a pre-cane system to basically get it out of the XP environment. So we have been doing that, and we're continuing to do that. It would be good if we could define acquisition processes that make that not a fight every time.
Great. Thank you.
Part of the normal process.
Thank you. This question for Admiral Baffer, we've got to get the Coast Guard in this conversation, but speaking of accelerating, the Coast Guard's getting some long overdue relief for the 40-year-old Arctic fleet. The President recently announced in August that he was accelerating the Polar Icebreaker program. What are we doing to ensure capable, sustainable assets there and through the rest of the Coast Guard fleet?
Sure, thanks, Pete. Let me just start with the icebreaker, though, and that announcement by the President was huge because we've been fighting this battle for the last 10 years of who's going to fund an icebreaker. We've got one Polar-class icebreaker that works right now. That's the Polar Star. It's on its way back from Antarctica right now. It did the annual resupply of McMurdo. It did fine. Again, it's 40 years old, so it's a white-knuckle ride getting it down there. And I appreciate the Marines that flew all those parts that we took off Polar Sea. We're actually not supposed to take parts off Polar Sea, but we did to keep Polar Star running, and they flew them down to
This
Seymour
is being
30.
taped, Bruce.
Yeah.
I just want to...
Okay. Well, we know where the parts are. We can get them back if we need them. But, you got to get that thing running, and it is as obsolete as they come. You can't buy these parts. The only place they exist is on Polar Sea. So we flew them down. We got it going, and they did a good job, and they're on their way back right now. So we're pretty proud of that. But we've been fighting a battle over who's going to pay for it. It's a national asset. These things cost upwards of $1 billion. Our shipbuilding budget per year is about $800 million. So it's a math event. It's a math problem. It doesn't fit in the Coast Guard shipbuilding budget. It's amazing what happens when the President goes up to Alaska and makes a statement that we're going to buy Polar-class icebreakers, heavy icebreakers, and you use an S, which we're really happy about because we really need 3 of them. Because you got to have the self-rescue capability. If this one goes down there and breaks, which it will, it's just a matter of when, who's going to go get it? The Russians have 41 icebreakers right now. They're building 17 more. And they've got a GMP that's 1/8 the size of the United States. And we're having trouble getting this done. But it's amazing when the President makes an announcement like that, how many roadblocks suddenly disappear. The whole executive branch gets aligned to, yes, we're doing this, and things are moving. In fact, his budget, the President's budget in 2017, has $150 million in it to get this project up and running. And that's more money than just feasibility studies and background studies and technical studies. That's actually doing the design and starting to buy long lead materials and getting this going. So we're pretty happy about getting a polar capability rolling again.
Just for the record, the Navy, we have these black things that go underwater. Those are our icebreakers, those fast-attack submarines.
Yeah. But I have
We now know who the submariner on the panel is.
Right. So I did hear a speech from the Secretary of the Navy. He said that the Arctic is too important to leave to the submarines, that we do need...
It's a team sport.
Now we're going.
That's, anyway. The Navy did have input into our requirements on the polar icebreaker. But I guess the question, though, was what are you doing to the rest of the
Has the
fleet?
Navy offered to pay?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No. But
We're not going to.
like I said, the President made his announcement. We all work for the same guy. The rest of the fleet, though, was a real question. What are you doing about the rest of the fleet? And we're in a recapitalization of the Coast Guard surface fleet. It's long overdue. Our median age of our cutters is 35 years. Our oldest is the Smilax. It was commissioned in 1943. So that puts it at 73 years, and it's still operating and working today. It's out doing buoys. So this is long overdue. We talk about speed of the fleet. Our issue with speed of the fleet typically is within acquisitions, since we're not developing new things, and the things that are developed new are coming from NavAir and NavSea, we're getting them from the Navy, but it's recognizing we've got a problem and we need to recapitalize before we get to the crisis. Typically, we get to the crisis, then you start the whole acquisition process. And by the time you actually roll something out, you're past extremis. So that's what we need to do, is to kind of plan ahead. But we're doing that right now with the NSCs, our National Security Cutter. We've got 5 delivered, 6, 7, 8 are being built. There's a program record of 8. Last year, Congress saw fit to add another National Security Cutter to us. So we're going to have 9 now. So we're pretty happy with that. And just to give a shout out to Dave Lewis and SPAWAR, these National Security Cutters have SCIF and have intel capabilities on them that SPAWAR installs and develops for us that we've never had that capacity before. And right now, they're just killing the drug trade. These cutters are coming back routinely with 30 to 50,000 pounds per patrol of pure cocaine. That's a whole tractor trailer full of uncut cocaine. If you think about, how much that is. Street value, basically it pays for the ship every patrol. That's operational effectiveness. The good news is business is good. The bad news is, as somebody with teenagers at home, business is good. But I'm just glad those cutters are out there getting the job done. So we're doing pretty good on the National Security Cutter fleet. Our patrol boats, the FRCs, we've got a program record of 58. We delivered 16. Those are rolling. They're primarily working in the Caribbean right now, and they're proving their worth. Our next project is the offshore patrol cutter. It's replacing our 30-year-old 270-foot cutters and our 50-year-old 210-foot cutters. We've been in a design competition. The proposals are coming in now. We've got contract-level designs done, and we've got 3. We're going to be down-selecting to a single contractor to build and start producing these ships. It's a program record of 25 ships. That's going to be really the workhorse of the Coast Guard. But the project is going very well. We've got contract-level designs done. We couldn't be happier with the 3 contract-level designs that we've got. There's not a bad choice for the Coast Guard. We've got the good opportunity of this summer. We just got to pick the best choice. But that's moving ahead. It was supported in the FY16 budget with down select money and detailed design money, and it was supported in the 17 President's budget with long lead materials. So that thing's kind of over the top and moving ahead. So from the on the surface side, we're in pretty good shape on recapitalization, and the one place that we're weak is in our inland river tenders, of which Smilax is one of them. They are old, and we don't have a good way ahead on those right now. If somebody wants to ask a question about that, we can talk more, but I'll cede the rest of my time to Dave Lewis because I know he's got a lot to talk about.
Well, I'm going to skip Dave for a minute and go down to the end, and we're going to come back to Dave because we've got a lot to talk about. But I'd like to give Admiral Selby this next one. Seeing that we've heard from several of our speakers at the conference about the CNO's new design, the 3 major interrelated global forces, the classic maritime system, the rise of the global information system, and the increasing rate of tech creation and adoption. In the context of those 3 forces, what is NAVSEA doing to align to Navy and Marine Corps needs? What's different?
That's great. So if you haven't read the Design for Maintaining Maritime Superiority, you got to go get it. It's a great read. It's a quick read, but it really lays out what the CNO and the rest of us are thinking about the future for the Navy. So let me ask, before I go into this, let me ask a question. By show of hands, who here is from industry? Okay. Who is from either academia, UARC, FFRDC? Okay, a few. And then who are government civilians? Okay, so mostly industry, good mix of government civilians. I see the folks in uniform, a lot of folks in uniform. Okay, that's great. All right, so I just want to kind of know who I'm talking to. So let me ask another question. I've heard a lot of talk up here from Admiral Daly and Admiral Grossklogs about some of the frustrations with the speed and the pace of getting things done, and acknowledgement that we've had such an incredible lead for so long that it's almost like we've been sleeping in a treehouse for the last 75 years, and it's only now that the other trees are getting tall enough where they're able to throw those pebbles and they're starting to tink on the window or on the roof. So we're just now kind of waking up and realizing, wow, they're getting close. We got to do something about this. So I think there's great acknowledgement and recognition across at least the Navy and DoD, I think as well, that it's time to change the rule set. So let me ask you this question. So I think most of you probably would agree that that margin of superiority is shrinking, okay? So I'm going to take that as a given. But let me ask you this. Think of your favorite company in Silicon Valley, Google, Apple, whoever. Do you think that they are losing that same advantage at the same pace we are? Show of hands. Did anybody think that? No. Maybe one, but I mean, most of you do not think that. Why is that? Got to firmly ask yourself, why is that? We've talked about culture. Culture came up here a minute ago. I mean, here's my hypothesis. Okay? I think we're playing a 21st century game with a 20th century rule book. And we need to change the rule book. We need to throw out the rule book. We need to start over. We need to rewrite it. And I'm not talking about when you're buying a multi-billion-dollar warship or aircraft carrier or even aircraft, because some of those processes are probably about right for doing those kind of things when you're building a big truck. But when you're building the payload, the smaller thing, the gadget, the weapon system that goes on that, we need a more nimble, more agile way of doing business, or we're going to get our clock cleaned. It's very apparent that the pace that the others are going is much faster than we are. We just can't keep up. So we need to change that rule book. With respect to the design that Admiral Daly mentioned, so the first part, maritime superiority, that's what NAVSEA does. We have 70,000 men and women arrayed across 16 states at 33 major installations, shipyards, warfare centers. We have about 150 program offices, including foreign military sales. We build ships. We build and maintain the fleet for the Navy. Surface ships, submarines, support vessels, that's what we do. So we support the maritime strategy in that way. And that's a huge job. We're looking at not just today's fleet, but what about tomorrow's fleet? That's a big part of it. The other part of the question involves kind of the information part of maritime strategy. This includes not only the flow of network traffic, internet traffic, also think of the infrastructure that's on the seafloor, whether that's oil pipelines in the Gulf of Mexico or across the North Atlantic, fiber optic cables. Right now we have more and more access to those parts of the seafloor. We just had the El Faro just went down in that hurricane last fall. NAVSEA's supervisor of salvage was working an ROV at 15,000 feet down looking for the data recorder. Couldn't find it, but we got down to the vessel. We were able to survey the wreckage. So we can now easily reach pretty much 98% of the seafloor with either remotely operated vehicles, or if you got enough money like Jim Cameron, you can go down to your own human-powered vehicle. So the seafloor is now accessible. That really changes the rule set, because now you got to think not only of what you can put there, but how do you now defend what's there? How do you monitor what's there? So that's a big part of what we need to do. So again, NAVSEA's got systems that are able to go to the ocean depth, things like the ROVs that OOC, our supervisor of salvage, operates. The third part of the question is this part about the rapid pace of technological change. So right now, if you think about this, in the last 2 years, last 24 months, we've added more computing power to the world than has ever existed in the entire existence of humanity. 2 years, we've added more computing power. In the next 24 years, it's going to go up about 1,000-fold again. That pace is not slowing down. Moore's Law is still about 18 months. It's still clipping along. There's no sign of it stopping. key is we have to figure out how to capture the ideas that are floating around in the Ethernet and start bringing those ideas together. When I think of innovation, I think of 3 types of innovation. The first type is kind of the aha moment. It's like, it's like the flux capacitor. You hit your head on the sink and you come up with that just genius invention that no one else thought of. That happens. It's pretty rare, quite frankly. The next type is what I call transportable or translatable innovations. This is kind of like you see something in one part of your life or you see something in one part of the world, you go back home and you realize, hey, that could work in my kitchen or that could work on my submarine. And you bring that idea and you may have to tweak it and mod it a little bit, but you transport that to another application. The third type of innovation, and this is the most, I think, most abundant, the one that's really out there, is combinatorial innovations. Taking multiple ideas, bringing them together into a new innovation. Anybody know the app Waze on your iPhone or your WAZE? Okay, so it's basically what it is. It's a GPS network. It's a position detection device in your phone. It's a phone, and it's a social network combined together. And it not only tells you how to go from here to grandma's house, it tells you where the speed traps are, tells you where the traffic is bad, it routes you around the traffic, it lets you communicate with other drivers and tell them about potholes in the road, cars broken down the side of the road. It's a phenomenal device. They're now using this to actually do traffic reports on radios. That's the future. It's combining ideas. We've got to figure out how to make the Navy more agile and nimble to be able to combine those ideas faster than anybody else. I'm convinced that the nation that can do that faster and better than others will lead this century. The good news is we are positioned to be that nation. We are more open than most nations. We put ideas out there. Think about Facebook, folks. I know more about my neighbors than I care to know. But we put it out there. We put ideas out there. There's some goodness to that. There's a lot more goodness than there's bad. There's bad too, but there's a lot of goodness. That's what we've got to do. We've got to capture those ideas, bring them together, new inventions, and rule the day. And we got to change the rule book for acquisition and the way we do business. This is everything from the way Congress allocates money to the way contracts are let, the way programs are run. We got to change the rule book. We're in the wrong rule book. It's like we're in the digital era. We're using the analog rule set. Got to change it. Okay, I'm done.
Well, thank you. The next two questions are going to be directed to Admiral Lewis and to Colonel Stinson. We've heard so much about cyber. Cyber's now not an enabler. Cyber is not an afterthought. It's a forethought. Tremendous emphasis in the whole program on the whole cyber piece. And indeed, tomorrow we're going to have four-star Admiral Mike Rogers here to speak on the topic, which he knows a little bit about. But for the panel, I mean, we've got the systems commanders here, and the rubber meets the road. I mean, you can have the good ideas all day long, but somebody has to buy it and deliver it, and that's the folks up here. So I asked Admiral Lewis, what is SPAWAR doing differently from past practice to field cyber secure systems in the C4I domain?
Okay, so if you look at cyber from an adversary's perspective, they don't see the things that we value inside the Navy the way we see them. We value NAVAIR, we value the difference with NAVSEA, SPAWAR, the 6 naval systems commands, MSC, Pacific, Atlantic, destroyers, carriers. Those are all important to us. Our adversary doesn't care about that at all. As a matter of fact, they would like to take advantage of that. So there's really 2 things happening different now than have happened in the past. The first is at the SysCom level, there is an organization called the Technical Advisory Board, Information Technology and Information Assurance Technical Advisory Board, kind of a kludgy name, but it's all of us getting together and talking about how we do things in a common way across all of the SysComs from a cyber perspective, cybersecurity perspective. And this week, you saw the first public fruits of that effort. It's been going on for a couple of years, lots and lots of good talk, lots and lots of good things happening. This week, we unveiled the first 8 of about 38 cybersecurity standards for the Navy. They'll be across all contracts, being invoked in all contracts, and they start the process of setting objective, measurable requirements for cybersecurity in the systems we procure and the systems we failed. So that's at the technical level. On the other side is the training level. Marines have a saying I like a lot, every Marine a rifleman, and we need to be the same way in cybersecurity for sailors, just like we do in damage control. Every sailor is a cyber warrior. Every sailor can compromise our cybersecurity by doing one thing wrong. And so at the fleet commanders and the TICOMs and at the ship level, we're training our sailors. It doesn't matter whether you're an IT man or an engine man or a fire control tech or a CS. There's a basic set of behaviors that you need to be following when you're on your ship, when you're not on your ship. What do you do with your personal devices? How do you behave in front of your tactical system? And there's things you're not supposed to do, and there are things you are supposed to do. If you want to know more about it, there's a thing called the SANS 20. It's a list of general good behaviors. I recommend it for you personally. Go take a look at that. Things you're supposed to do, things you're not supposed to do. And we're teaching the sailors, we're training the sailors that. We're training all of our workforces at all of the SysComs have at least a basic level of cybersecurity training. If you're designing a system or you're fielding a system and it has a computer in it, you're a cyber warrior at some level. You could be a logistician, you could be a contract specialist, it doesn't matter. You're there and you're a potential vulnerability at a minimum. Ideally, you're a person that can find a problem and fix a problem. So that's what's happening differently now. The SysComs are working together on those technical standards, on finding people that know good things and then cross-pollinating across the systems commands. And then the key is the training the sailors that are using those systems, what they can do, what they should do, what they shouldn't do.
Thanks, Dave. Dave, just so I understand this, are these technical standards, is this dealing with the fact, we got all liquored up over the past 10 to 15 years on commercial standards. We'll build it to a commercial standard because industry will make the turn, they'll make the investment, and we'll get all the benefits from that. And then more recently, we see that, okay, this stuff we bought, phones home, it has built-in RFI tags in it. We all saw the Malaysian airliner, and even though Malaysian Airlines didn't buy the phone home maintenance, the engines were phoning home, and that's why we even kind of think we know where that airplane might be. So is that what these technical standards do? How do you square that circle?
I think when we did the COTS procurement, we were looking to save money, and we saved a lot of money. It turns out when you save money, there are some things we didn't buy or we didn't know to buy as we were saving money. So cybersecurity is obviously a big booming field right now, and I say this facetiously, but it's true. Everybody I talk to that's doing cybersecurity has been doing it for 30 years. Everybody I talk to has been doing it for 30 years. They might have bought a company last week that's been doing it for 30 years, but by golly, they've been doing it for 30 years. So it's very subjective, a lot of brochure marketing. The standards provide an objective laydown. Within those 38 standards, I don't remember the exact numbers, there's 975 or so controls. And a control is a sentence. It's a paragraph that says, you should be doing this. So if you're going to sell me a cybersecurity system to do a thing, host-level protection, network protection, architecture, there's going to be there is a list of controls that go with that standard. And I expect you to articulate your product to me or to G8 or anybody in the context of those very objective statements. Doesn't mean you have to meet them all, because it's dependent on the system that they're being used in, but you should be able to articulate why your product does or does not do that thing. And why that's a good or bad thing. And then as a customer, as an informed, smart customer, then we can make informed, smart customer decisions about what we're buying. This is no different than airworthiness standards or welding standards or shock and vibe standards. They're down there. You know what they are. You bid to them. We waive them from time to time. That's okay, but that's our decision. And it's done in an objective environment with full knowledge. And that's what the cybersecurity standards give us, is that template against which individual programs, SysComs, can start to measure their level of cybersecurity in an objective way, and then make cost, risk-based decisions on how much do you need. Sometimes you don't need very much. Sometimes you need a lot, and these now become a measure of that, an objective measure of that.
Thank you. I'd like to get Colonel Ben Stinson in on this discussion with respect to cyber. First and foremost, what expeditionary capabilities is the Corps providing, and are we getting them what they need to operate in an increasingly complex C4I and cyber environment?
Thank you, sir. If you were coming here to hear General Schrader speak, I'm sorry you get me instead. I'm going to start off with, thank you for that vote of confidence. You haven't heard me speak yet, so you might want to just wait on that. So I'm going to start out with those capabilities, and the Commandant has identified those capabilities. First, General Dunford, in the Commandant's planning guidance, set the Marine Corps on a course for the future. A year later, less than a year later, he's moved up to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and General Neller has now put out his FRAGO, which describes, says first, the Commandant's planning guidance remains in effect. It's a good cardinal heading. He took a few opportunities to make some adjustments to the course of the Marine Corps. His 5 priorities are people, readiness, training and simulation and experimentation, integration with naval forces, and modernization and technology. The Commandant's Title 10 authorities, responsibilities are train, man, and equip. Marine Corps Systems Command helps the Commandant fulfill that last 1/3 of his mission. So I want to talk to you about a few things that Marine Corps Systems Command does to address experimentation, some initiatives that we're doing, and then talk about some of our programs to answer the question, what are we doing to put those capabilities in the hands of warfighters? Recently, we conducted an experiment. We called it the Limited Objective Experiment, and it was to test connecting tactical networks to garrison networks. We called it the Deployed Marine Corps Enterprise Network Limited Objective Experiment. It proved that the Marine Corps can connect tactical systems to garrison systems, but it also shows that there are a lot of other things we need to work on within .mil PF, so not just the material things, but doctrine, policy, training, to be able to allow those tactical systems with the vulnerabilities that they would bring to the network to be able to function, provide capability, and not add any more risk to the warfighter. The point of the capability is for the warfighter who plans on a garrison network, has their regular email on a garrison network, that when they deploy, they no longer have to change their email, lose access to all of the information stored on their SharePoint or cloud services, if you will, when they deploy to a forward environment. That first limited objective experiment concluded in July, and we are already working on the second one to expand the services or increase the services that we bring forward to the tactical network. In the area of initiatives, Marine Corps Systems Command stood up a cyber acquisition team. This team has two responsibilities. The first is to outwardly coordinate and communicate and prioritize with our stakeholders and our requirements generation folks within the Marine Corps to make sure that we've got the right priorities that we're working on, and to make sure that we talk about what it is we have to do to get those things out there, the rules, if you will, that we've talked about earlier. The prioritization also allows us to tailor the rule set appropriate to the level of change that we want to bring out in the capability. Internally, that cyber acquisition team coordinates across the multiple program offices, portfolios of equipment that have a stake in the game of cyber. One of the things, for instance, that they're working on is all of our programs that have Windows will now need to transfer to Windows 10. Rather than each program office solving the problem on how they're going to transfer to Windows 10, the cyber acquisition team allows us to sit down, become more efficient and more effective with our processes within Marine Corps Systems Command to solve problems once. In terms of programs and equipment that we've fielded, we recently fielded networking on the move for Marine Corps tactical vehicles. Networking on the move is a communications package that allows over-the-horizon, beyond line of sight, digital C2 for the battlefield commander while on the move and at the halt. These maneuver forces then can use tactical voice, radio, data, video, and their C2 applications that they would normally have to stop and set up a command operations center to be able to access. A related capability that was recently fielded with our NavAir teammates was the hatch-mounted satellite communication antenna system on the C-130J. This satellite system, connected via PRC-117 Golf radios, allows us to talk to the Osprey, which enables us to provide support to the special MAGTF commanders, allowing them a capability on long-range raids to be able to do updated planning as they're en route and or get new situational awareness. Some of those raids go on for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and the situation can change before they even get there. We're also leveraging COTS handheld systems that deliver situational awareness, fires, intelligence, and other data and applications to all levels of the MAGTF. This is a critical enabler for distributed operations, which you can find more about if you read Expeditionary Force 21. That document, the concepts provided in there, discuss MEB afloat and how a MEB distributed afloat will operate, as well as company landing teams, sending small teams out very far without the support that they would normally have. How are they going to remain connected? How are they going to maintain SA? And how are we going to take care of all the things we need to do in combat for them?
Hey, Ben, let me jump in here. I've heard a lot about Marines who have been in the desert, and they've been at FOBs that had fiber optic support. And then they come back to the fleet that's not hooked up to that fiber optic cable that, you know, just to picture it might be of one big pipe. What are you hearing, and are the Marines happy with what they're getting as they embark on Navy ships?
We all have to get used to being back on ship. That is something that the Commandant puts as a key priority in his document. Yes, we have systems that have been developed that were not as bandwidth constrained as they will be aboard amphibious shipping. We are doing many things in terms of engineering the systems, accelerators, using accelerators on the network. A lot of it has to do with discipline of the use of the systems, as well as the Commandant also talks about making sure that we are not reliant on a connected environment. In an A2AD environment, we need to be able to make sure that we can still operate in all 5 domains. So you'll hear the Commandant say, I want to make sure my lieutenants at TBS still know how to use a map and a compass. I guess that's my answer, that even without this connectivity...
General Mattis would agree with you on that.
Yes, sir, he would.
Yes, he would.
Just one thing real quick on that, Ben, before you move on, but this is the concept that I like to call network optional warfare, right? So we got all liquored about network-centric warfare 10, 15 years ago, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, think about your personal lives. Everything in your home is connected to the internet. My treadmill's connected. I mean, everything is connected to the internet. It's the Internet of Things. But sometimes we went a little too far, and we're now realizing that. We're kind of walking ourselves back. But the CNO now talks a lot about decentralized control, trying to get back to letting commanders command in the field without being tethered back to the home base via some internet link. So we've got to have the ability to connect when it's safe to, but also disconnect and then operate disconnected. So that's kind of that network optional warfare mentality we got to get into.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit here because I want to get to the audience and their questions. I have one last question I want to put to each one of you, and you could give me a short burst on this. But one thing that I hear often from industry is that, you know, they went to the presentation, they heard this or that flag officer or general officer say, we're all about innovation. And to the left of innovation is experimentation and testing. And rightfully, there's a big emphasis on, in the speeches and the pronouncements about partnering with industry. So the right things are said. But one of the things you hear is, well, we went out, we drank the Kool-Aid, and we went out and developed something. And then we brought it to the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard. And at first, they were excited about it, and then they gave it to the lawyers and said, oh, this is an unsolicited proposal. So you drank the Kool-Aid, you did the innovation, you're trying to do the partnership thing, and you want to bring this item to the military and test it, maybe have them use it in a fleet experiment, and the answer is, sorry, we didn't buy that, so we can't go near it. So that might be a little harsh, but could each of you, and I don't care which order you take, talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to throw, after we hear from you all, we're going to throw it open to the audience.
Sure, I'll start. It goes back to the risk-averse culture that we've built up, and we got to get our folks to think more broadly. We were talking about this before the panel started, where we've incentivized some of our industry partners to develop things under IRAD, and then they bring them to us and they go, hey, we've got a solution. We go, that's great. We're going to compete it. You know, what did we just do to industry's incentive? So I hear what you're saying. I empathize with you, and until you see us changing, you should keep asking us and keep beating us over the head with that. It fundamentally comes back to sitting down with our folks almost on a one basis and going, no, you can do that. It's okay. You don't have to accept no for an answer from the lawyer or the contracting officer. If you think it's the right thing to do, you need to elevate it up your food chain and let your program executive officer or let your systems commander, let somebody else make that decision. Don't accept no at the lowest level. And if it's something that you all have developed under IRAD and it was done, quite honestly, because we encouraged you to do that, and you're getting pushback on it, then you need to elevate it inside the government chain, because again, our program managers, I think, feel constrained. They're risk averse right now, and we've got to get them out of that mindset. We're working on that, but I hear you.
Okay. Anybody else want to take that one on?
So 20th century lawyer.
Yeah,
Got
I'll
to
jump
change the
in.
process. I mean, we really do. And the bottom line is that, I mean, we up here on this panel, we need to help you, to help us, to help you. And a lot of this is unknown territory. It really is. It's new rule sets that have to be developed. And it may require new authorities. It most certainly will. But we have to have the conversation, because it's absolutely wrong for us to encourage you to do something like that and then come to the door and say, "Yep, sorry, not today." We got to figure this out.
Bruce, did you have something?
Sure. It's also important to recognize where you enter the organization. In big A acquisitions, that's not the place for, I hate to use the word innovation, because we do talk about innovation, but we're not looking for the new idea, the let's test it out. Those things need to go to the R&D environment. We need to go to we have an R&D center in the Coast Guard. You take those unsolicited proposals to them. They have the authorities, and they can test it out. And the idea is to prove it out, test it out, and make sure it's developed so the risks are down to the point where we can bring it into acquisitions. But there's a difference between development and engineering. Acquisitions is you're engineering it and you're putting it in practice and you know it's going to work. If you're developing it and you haven't proven it out yet, you need to be in the R&D organization, because they've got more flexibility, and we want to limit the investment in it while we make sure that it's going to work.
Okay, Dave, did you have something?
I keep a copy of Winston Churchill's shortest speech ever given on my desk. He gave it at 8 o'clock in the morning at a commencement. Winston Churchill didn't do 8 o'clock in the morning, so he was a little grumpy. And the entire speech is never, never, never give up. Okay, so I'd say that to industry: if you got a good idea, keep pounding the doors down, exactly what Admiral Grossklag said. We're often well insulated from the truth. We say things, and sometimes you're the one that comes and says, hey, Admiral, you said do this, and it's not happening. And I value that conversation. And I want to hear that. And in many cases, you industry, the only one saying that to me. I got lots of people that are, they want me to be happy. And I don't want to be happy. I want to be well informed. So, pick up the phone, send a note, and say exactly what the Admiral said is, hey, you said this and it's not happening. And now that may be you. I'd ask you to acknowledge that. But at least have the conversation and give me the chance to, give us the chance to engage.
Okay, you heard it here. Dave Lewis says he's the one who can say no. And so, but not everybody underneath him can say no. I mean, I think we've all been involved in situations, whether it's in a bureaucracy like the military or a bureaucracy in the corporate world, where too many people are empowered to say no, and it takes a complete firing chain, to say yes. And so the Marines, I heard what Bruce said about, well, if you do it at the R&D stage, before it's fully developed, before you've really got an end-use item, you bring it to the R&D guy. But I mean, for Colonel Stinson, it seems like you'd be a good example for this. I'm sure there's people that have fully developed solutions that they bring in every day, and you can't just say, well, you should have hit the R&D on-ramp. So what say you about this from the Marine Corps standpoint?
Yes, sir. I think the Commandant has heard you, industry. If you were to take a look at his Frago and do a word count on how many times he uses the word experiment or new technology or innovate, you'd be surprised to find out how many times that happens. So he specifically calls out in there who in the Marine Corps will be doing this. We're all going to be a part of the experimentation and the innovation, but the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab has been specifically addressed as the lead for that, along with the Capabilities Development Integration Division underneath McCITIC. So they're going to be looking at quick turns on requirements. They're going to create venues in which people can bring new technologies and new capabilities, get them in the hands of the Marines, try them out, and see their value. Because we're not just going to bring new things into the Marine Corps just because they're new. They have to give a tactical commander an advantage on the battlefield.
Got it. Well, I'm right now declaring a 5-minute extension, so we have at least 15 to 20 minutes for questions. And I want to invite now the audience. We've got mics at both ends. I ask you to use the mic, and I ask you to ask a question, and then we'll answer it. So fire away. This gentleman over here.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm Dick Alborn, retired 06 submariner. Good words from all of you and much appreciated. But over the past, there's only been one flag officer that I've heard openly espousing the acceptance of innovative technologies, and urging his program managers to accept, mitigate, and manage the inherent risk. And I think it was 3 SAS Navy leagues ago when PEOA got up and gave that speech to all assembled. And for once the system worked. I was delighted when Admiral Grossklogs then got sent up to Sean Stackley's office, where those attitudes could be put to best use. So, Admiral, my question to you is, from your time up there, were you able to make inroads amongst our senior civilians to do the kind of culture change that we've been talking about here?
Inside the Navy a little bit. With OSD, I'd say very little. What I alluded to at the beginning of my initial question response to Pete was about the initiative that the Navy has right now for the rapid prototyping and experimentation, which is really being pushed by Secretary Stackley. He and DAS and RDT&E, John Burrow, are leading that effort. Obviously, they're working with the OPNAV resource sponsors, coordinating what of the particular things that are being brought to the table, some by industry, some by our warfare centers. They've kind of opened the door and said, bring us your ideas. We're not going to be able to fund all of them in this prototyping and experimentation world, but we're going to take the ones that the fleet votes on, and the fleet gets a big vote in this, and we're going to take those and we're going to give them to the fleet and let them experiment with them and see if they fit a capacity or a capability gap. So from that perspective, I'm not sure there's anything I did, but it's really kind of a mindset Secretary Stackley is trying to push across the Navy to take advantage of the innovation, take advantage of what you all can bring to the table, and what our warfare centers as well can bring to the table.
Thank you, sir. Is it acknowledged that we're only half of the problem, that the program managers amongst our prime contractors are also as risk-averse as our own PMs have been?
I think so. I certainly believe that. I think you'll have to ask the industry counterparts out here what they believe. But I think we've helped make them that way. We don't tolerate them taking risk on our behalf. We smack them in the hands when they do that. And we've got to get out of that mindset for our own folks when we empower them and say, no, we trust you to go do this. It doesn't mean they're going to make decisions every day that we personally agree with, but we got to let them do that. That's part of the innovation that we've got to let grow. And we've got to let industry participate in that. We can't just cut them off and say, no, that's not the way to do it.
Can I jump in?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
As a program manager, I mean, there's a roles and missions component to this, and a program manager is tasked to do something within a given cost, schedule, and performance box, and to deliver a product inside that box. I think a lot of what we're talking about is that box defined 3 years in advance? Is that box defined 7 years in advance? Or is that box defined 6 weeks in advance, or 3 months in advance, or a year in advance? And when I look at commercial industry, and when I look at successful innovations in the commercial C4I IT world, those program manager boxes are just like ours, but they're 3 months long, or they're 6 months long, or they're 1 year long. And in our ability to correctly predict cost, schedule, and performance, or industry's ability to correctly predict cost, schedule, and performance on a 6-week timeline or a 12-week timeline, I'm speaking Agile here, is pretty good. And I would say our ability to do that, when I've seen projects in the Navy that have had those timelines, we're pretty good at it. Secretary Danzig wrote a really nice paper, Driving in the Dark. We try to predict things 25 years in advance, and we're awful at that. And yet we try to hold our program managers to that standard. And I would advocate that no human being can do that. It's not possible. We set requirements that in 2028 we're going to do this. It's not going to happen. So I think a lot of it is expectation setting, roles and mission for a program manager. I want you to deliver this box. I want you to deliver in 12 months. That's doable. That's a good skill set. Experimentation, innovation, that needs to happen first.
Okay, I think we've got to spread it around here. This gentleman over here.
Good morning, panel. My name is Jim.
Nope, got to use the microphone, got to ask a question.
Okay. My name is Jim Harkins. I am not a graduate of your prestigious schools, but I am a graduate of the Marine Corps and MTISA. So my question goes to the air wing, the ships, the boats, submarines, and to the battlefield. And it goes like this. I remember the Pueblo, the Liberty, and now 2 ships in the Persian Gulf, I believe. All of them had communications problems. Communications, electronics, propulsion, and GPS. The Marine Corps fired a number of OCS cadets because they used GPS instead of map reading, going back to what we were talking about. What are we doing on the cipher portion of not allowing that to happen, the cut down or the slowdown or the communications not being allowed to be done through cyber communications issues?
Maybe Dave on that one?
I'll start.
Or Lauren.
So some of this, again, as I said, we started connecting everything we could think of to the internet years ago. I mean, so just like the jet engine on the on the 767s talking back to the shore, so is the turbine on the destroyer talking back to my Philadelphia Warfare Center. We did that because we could and because we thought it made sense at the time. We've now realized, hey, that probably is not such a good idea. So we're going back now and trying to selectively disconnect things and slow down some of these connections and only do it when we think it makes sense or is safe to do it. So you're right. I mean, it's we've got to be more judicious with the things we connect to the internet or to shore via means to prevent those kind of vulnerabilities.
All right, thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Over here.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Kristen Wheeler, and I'm on the Navy Innovation Advisory Council out in Silicon Valley right now. Been there for 3 months. Really some interesting stuff going on that's out there.
Can you just stand a little closer to the mic so we can hear you better?
Sure, is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So the question that Admiral Selby proposed earlier was, why are we losing our margin of military dominance and why Google is not? So we've gotten to interact with them and see why are they doing so well. And it comes back to the end users. They're incorporating their end users into the problem, like into the bringing up the problems and being part of the solutions. And there's different avenues out there that are cropping up, like the Athena project, the Hatch, DIUX, and Human Systems Integration Department at NPS, RoboDojo, the maker spaces. But yet there seems to be a disconnect still between the strategic level and the tactical level of getting these things together to where they're actually working great.
Right. So let me take that real quick. So I have found that the more closely tied the engineer at NAVSEA, I'm sure it's the same for NAVAIR or SPAWAR, is to the fleet, the better the end product will be. Okay, so let me give you an example. So in Crane, Indiana, we stood up a lab. We call it the RIPPLE, Rapid Innovation Prototyping Lab. Okay, and this center got a project about 6 months ago from Warcom. Brian Losey here in San Diego had a concern. He wanted to have his SEALs be able to communicate with their flat, their basically iPad. It's not an iPad. It's some other screen, Surface or whatever it was, with the beach while they were underwater. So they approached my Crane Warfare Center, the RIPPLE. They sent a couple SEALs to Indiana, and they spent 3 or 4 days talking to about 12 of my engineers there and described the problem, talked about the challenges they had, talked about the ways they navigate underwater now, basically with kick counts, 50 kicks this way, 50 kicks that, whatever. I mean, that's the way they do it. And so they described the problem. They went back to San Diego. This very diverse group of engineers, and again, these were pulled from all corners of my warfare center. They didn't know each other necessarily. It was just a bunch of 12 folks that we pulled in that wanted to think different about problem sets to solve problems. They then spent a week prototyping ideas, actually building cardboard mock-ups of what they thought this thing should look like. They then actually built a plexiglass model that was waterproof enough to take to a swimming pool to test. They took it to San Diego, let the SEALs swim around in the swimming pool with it for an afternoon, got more feedback of what they liked and didn't like, designed the tow point for the antenna differently. I mean, they changed a few things, went back to Crane, mocked the thing up, actually built one, sent it back to the SEALs, and they now have, I don't know how many they got. They got a bunch now. They love it. But it was that human connection between those engineers and those warfighters that really drove this innovative engine and got everybody inspired to put out this product. And we did it in under 5 weeks total. Insane.
So here's my question. I think that makes a lot of sense, for special operators at that level. It's very tactical. For G8 or maybe Dave or Bruce, the colonel, does that scale well? Because the premise of the question is that they're successful because they're in contact with their customer and they have a rapid process, putting the right people together early enough, and then they literally deliver. So how do we scale this up, to more complex systems?
I think we can scale it into our mods and upgrades fairly easily. Digital interoperability, which has been a big focus in Marine Corps aviation over the past couple of years, we've done kind of the same thing, taken the real fleet inputs, the men and women flying the airplanes, operating the airplanes, and said, hey, we need to be able to communicate between these different platforms in the air. We can't do it today. We just haven't invested the money. Is there a quick solution? Is there a way we can do this kind of, I don't want to say Band-Aids and patches, but that's what we ended up with. Now our challenge is to take that, what we've done there, and turn it into something that can last longer and be supported and sustained across all the MUs, not just the one we focused on for that particular activity. So I think we can do it in pockets, but eventually if we want to expand it across the entire aviation, even inside a certain community, just H-1s or just V-22s, we've eventually got to turn it into something more. But it goes back to the rapid prototyping experimentation. If we can pull that off, and we can allow, Congress will allow us to do it, and OSD will allow us to do it, I think there's huge potential in that, because it is exactly what you're talking about. It's the fleet voice talking directly to our warfare centers, trying to come up with solutions to their problems.
Great question.
Thank you. And Dr. Morris Sullivan is talking at 1600 today more about this topic if anybody's interested.
Thank you. Bruce, did you have something on that?
I would just say I agree with everything about scaling it. To get to the top level, though, where really the hard point is going to be in the testing community. When you get to the operational testing evaluation, that's what drives you to be risk averse in acquisitions, because there is no room for error, and you've got a set of requirements that are broken down to every last little gnat and detail, and then you miss one of those details, and you've got a GAO report coming at you and a congressional hearing. So at the top level, you can do the experimentation and the innovation, but once you try to produce that at the large scale, at the acquisition level, it's the testing community is really where that we've got to make some changes there if we're going to have success in the acquisition world.
Agreed about needing changes. Dave?
But again, I think that's to that correctly defining that transition point from experimentation and innovation over to product delivery. You know, the mechanics of delivering a thing are pretty straightforward because you need to have that very well-articulated requirement set, and you need to test to that well-articulated requirement set. But that doesn't mean that has to be there. There shouldn't be any risk in that requirement set. The ship goes 25 knots. I know the ship goes 25 knots. I've tested it, I've innovated, I've experimented, and I'm basically, in the production phase, I'm just checking the block to make sure that everything that happened before actually happened. So that's kind of what Secretary Danzig was getting at, is we need to drive the risk out of that product delivery part and do it in the innovation experimentation part, so that when we transition to make a thing like you're describing, it's pretty well boxed in.
Right. Well, look, we declared overtime. We're at 1 minute to go in the fourth quarter. And, sir, you have the last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Richard Lewis. I'm a Korean War, I guess it's a war veteran. And I wonder if any of you have developed, used the organizational concept of matrix management developed in the aerospace industry for technology.
Would you say that again? The matrix what?
Matrix management.
Matrix management.
MATRIX.
I think that's I'll take that. That's a fundamental principle in how we manage programs today. I'm a systems commander, so I don't make products. I support program executive officers. I have 3 of them. There's others. So I provide them contracts people. I provide them legal. I provide them program office support. So we do that. We call it competency-aligned organization now, different term, but it's exactly what you're describing. And so programs, at least in SPAWAR, are a relatively small number of people attached directly to the program, and a larger number of people that work for somebody else, normally me, and provide those specific skill sets. And I manage those competencies, their level of training and all that kind of stuff, but they physically work in a program office or in a PEO.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all our panelists who traveled, in most cases, from the East Coast to incur the weather here in San Diego and put themselves out there to answer these questions. I know there's probably some additional ones. They might stay back a minute or two. But as a thanks, Naval Institute and AFCEA would like to present each one of them with the Naval Institute on naval innovation. We kind of took our best of from proceedings. There's an AFCEA bookmark in here. But let's give a big hand to all our panelists.